Hey, friends, it's Kev. Big warning, there are some serious spoilers about a TV show in this episode. It's called Your Honor, and my guest today is David Matthews, who was the head writer on that show. I consider this the best single season of television I've ever watched. It's an incredible show, and it was a thrill to interview David. I have this idea for another show or a type of episode for this show, and I call it Paid to Create. And the simple idea is that I interview people who have succeeded in life and in business with only their creative work. So in this case, a television writer and a novelist and a memoir writer. And I go through three different things with them. The calling, what led them to their creative work, the craft, going deep into how they perform their craft, and then the commerce, talking about the money around their craft. So I hope you dig it. I may release this as a separate type of show altogether, or I may just incorporate it here into Copy Chief Radio. And so I'd love to hear feedback from you about this episode. If you're so kind and willing, you can email me directly, kevin@copychief.com, and let me know your thoughts about it. And I'd love to do more of these for you. All right, enjoy, and watch out for the spoilers.
You're listening to Copy Chief Radio. Get all the episodes and join the community at copychief.com.
Hey, I'm here with David Matthews, who is a television writer and producer. He'll explain what that means in a minute. He's also an author. David has two fantastic books. One is a memoir of his early life called Ace of Spades, and also Kicking Ass and Saving Souls, which is also a kind of a memoir, I guess, David. It's really about your friend. Biography, yeah, of your friend Stefan, who has just this incredible life as well. So thank you for being here, man. I'm really thrilled to talk to you today. This show, of course, is about helping people understand the industry that they may desire to succeed in someday. Yours is TV writing. Your credits are very high level. Them, Boardwalk Empire, to name a few. And the show Your Honor, which I'll just divulge right now that I, without a doubt, consider the single best season of television to exist. Season one of Your Honor, personally. So we'll get into that a little bit, bias exposed. But David, let's talk about the calling. When in your life did it start to click for you that writing had meaning for you?
Pretty early on, my dad was a journalist growing up, and he raised me. So from an early age, sort of the written word was everything in our house. That coupled with him being a single dad, my babysitter was the TV. So if there wasn't a book in my hand, it was Three's Company or Get Smart or whatever on TV. So between those two worlds of my head in a book and my head in TV, fast forward many years, it sort of was, well, what else am I qualified to do besides this? So it was it was a longer, more circuitous route, but it was really just not being good at anything else and not wanting to do anything else. Now, insert into that the obligatory 23 years of waiting tables to get to that, because there is no path really for it. Or back then there wasn't, I'm Gen X. So the world of, I'm going to go to Hollywood at age 19 and make it as a TV writer because there's all these shows. There weren't. There were 3 networks and something called HBO when I started. And being a TV writer was just not a thing. So I'll try to make it as least boring as possible. I went to film school because I was such a cinephile. This is early 90s, late 80s. And I realized, I like watching movies and TV. I'll do this. I'll be the next Quint. And I went to film school, waited tables, bartended, paid my own way. And then eventually, right at the time I was ending film school, this thing called pre-Golden Age TV was starting to happen. And during my waiting tables, bartending life, I'd probably written 8 scripts just at night by myself. No one ever read them. Just, I figured this is what you do. There's a place in New York, at least it used to be the Mac store in Soho, forget the street, but the Apple store, there was a guy with a big card table with bound scripts,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I had never seen before.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, what are these? And I would just take my bartending money and buy 5 of them and basically steal the entire format, and that's how I sort of taught myself, me and Sid Field, the Bible back then.
Yeah.
It's a pretty involved story about how I got discovered after that, but I'll let you tell me how much you want to hear about the nonsense.
I really want to hear it all. I want to go back a little bit to your dad, Ralph, who was a pretty major journalist, right? What was his main publication when you were growing up?
Back then, I mean, my dad was born in the 1920s, so and he was a civil rights journalist. So most of the newspapers he would work for, he was the editor of a newspaper called the Baltimore Afro-American, which is the oldest Black newspaper in America. And his father was the editor of it before him. Wow. But again, these were not mainstream. If you said them to the mainstream world, these are rinky-dink little papers no one had ever heard of. But in the civil rights movement, they were pretty important. Now, to a little kid growing up in Baltimore who looked white and wanted to be pals with all the rich Jewish kids, that was not something I put on my resume. Like, my dad has this paper, because you could only it was the kind of paper you could find in the hood, at the convenience store, but no one else had ever heard of it. So my dad's whole thing was, he would tell me when I said I wanted to be a writer, he's like, well, writers write every day and they get published. So by the time I started writing my own screenplays, my dad was like, I don't understand why you're doing this. No one's paying you for this. Why are you doing it? Writers don't write for free, because he was very workmanlike. It was a business for him, not a lucrative one. So it was a little, there was the classic generational divide over well, Dad, I'm betting on myself and whatever. Luckily, I got to make it before he passed away. So I got to go, good. See, I told you. But yeah, so I think he did instill the sort of the love of writing. He would edit my little short stories for me, et cetera, et cetera. But he did find my avocation to be somewhat frivolous.
Sure, understood.
Because I wasn't changing the world.
Gotcha, right, understood. Yeah, this is a man who considered among his friends Malcolm X and James Baldwin. I mean, this is, high level stuff. So you're around these incredible thinkers and writers, artists as a young person. It makes sense that you would be led there, but not everybody is. But you still had the courage to show him your stories. Did he encourage you to write? Always.
Yeah. He always encouraged me to write. He's also, I guess that generation would be technically boomers. So as a boomer, he was, I want to say up until about 15 years ago. Now, I dropped out of film school 10 credits short, just because the $100,000 worth of student loans and what I was like, why am I doing this anymore? I know how to work the camera. I know how to do this. I'm not staying here to get my math credit. Right. My dad, literally, I was on Law and Order SVU my first season. Right before I got the job, he was like, I still think you should go get your degree. You could teach a degree. To him, it was that if you have a degree, you can get a decent job. Right. And I was always I don't want a job. I want a career doing what I want in the arts. And there is no degree for that. The one thing about Hollywood, I don't know if it's the same in your field, no one cares. If you went to school, where you went to school, how many degrees, it is meaningless. The janitor with an amazing screenplay is 10 steps ahead of the kid who went to NYU with a shitty screenplay.
Yeah, right. They're just looking for the work. Yeah. So good. And so then, let's talk about, I feel like I read something where somebody inspired you or suggested that you write the memoir before you even started writing TV. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was working at a restaurant called 11 Madison Park in New York City. I worked there. That's where I met Laura's husband, Stephen, who was my manager. So I was working as a waiter and a bartender there, writing my screenplays on my days off and on weekends. And Frank Rich from the New York Times and his wife, Alex Witchell, were regulars of mine. And they would always ask for me. And one day, I think I was showing them the cheese board or something. And I used the word timorous. And he looked at me and he's like, that's a pretty deep in the crates. He's like, what? And from that discussion, I was like, oh, well, I'm right. And so we started talking. I was like, yeah, I'm trying to be a screenwriter. And then he asked me, well, where are you from? Your parents? And I told them the one-liner of my dad, famous civil rights journalist, Jewish mother that I never met, grew up in the ghetto in Baltimore, pretended to be white until I was 18. And Alex Witchell, I think, said, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't need to be writing screenplays. You need to write a memoir. Like, this story is amazing. And I was like, nobody cares about this. And I had an agent. I had just gotten a screenwriting agent. And I called my agent and I said, hey, let me run this by you. And he stopped me mid-pitch and he goes, you're not mixed. You're a rich Jewish kid like me. And I'm like, no, dude. I'm like, this is actually who I am. And he said, hang up the phone. I'm calling you back. So he called me back like 5 minutes later. He said, I have the lit department from, I think it was ICM. At ICM, tell them what you just told me. And I said, yeah, my dad, blah, blah, blah. And they said, let's put a pause in this screenwriting thing. If you write this as a memoir, Hollywood will kick down your back door. This is the era of James Fry was, before he got busted, James Fry was like the biggest thing going. It was the era of the memoir. And so I literally put together a pitch for a memoir, a story I never wanted to write, by the way. I had no desire to write about myself. In my head, like, I'm supposed to be writing gangsters and cops and aliens, whatever.
I'm the observationalist, right?
Exactly. Inventing other worlds and other people.
Yeah.
So I wrote this thing. There was a little bidding war. I mean, I'm condensing this, but it did happen very quickly. Mind you, I'm 39 when this happened. So this is not, I had been really in the salt mines for many years. And there was a bidding war for the proposal. I wrote the book. David Simon was at the same publisher that Henry Holt, where Ace of Spades was published. He got a galley of the book. And he, one day, literally, this is one of those stories that sounds apocryphal, but I'm sitting home eating ramen and my phone rings and he goes, is this Dave Matthews? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, this is David Simon. I think it's a prank. He goes, I just got your galley. Would you like a blurb? I was like, humana, yes. I said, but look, if I'm honest, the only reason I wrote this fucking book is so that I could get into the screenwriting business. Do you have any spot? It was the last season of The Wire. I said, do you have any open spots? And he said, well, I promised this one spot to this writer, Richard Price. I said, but Richard sometimes misses deadlines. Show me what you got. So I think I crushed up an Adderall, and in 3 days, I banged out a Wire pilot script, or not spec script, not pilot.
Yeah.
So I banged out this Wire script. I sent it to him, and he wrote back. He said, guess what happened while you were writing this? Richard Price committed to doing the episode, so I don't have a spot, but your script was pretty good. And I'm like, well, you win some, you lose some. About 6 months later, I get an email from him, one line. It said, producer may call. That was the entirety of the email. And a producer called, and literally the first words out of their mouth were, we were after David Simon to do this movie with George C. Wolfe directing it and Ben Stiller starring. David Simon said, I'm not the guy, but I know the guy. And they're like, that's why you're on the phone with us. Wow. They're like, we don't know who you are, but if David Simon says you're the guy, you're the guy. They sent me the premise of the thing. I wrote it. They loved it. Ben Stiller loved it. For various Hollywood reasons, the movie fell apart, as 99% of all movies do. But that's the thing that got me. So really, it was that blurb call from David Simon connecting me with those people. You could draw a line from Frank Rich to David Simon to, I've been very lucky in terms of kind of being at the right place at the right time.
However, like you said, we're talking about a decade of you grinding and trying and creating momentum. It's the old thing, luck is when, opportunity meets. It's just so true. And I just always emphasize this to people, like, if all you're doing is reading about the craft or the thing you want or the industry, don't do that. Listen to what David just said. He just started buying scripts off the street corner and writing his own versions of them, right? He was teaching himself the craft. Okay, can we get into I'm so fascinated by TV writing in so many ways. The Stiller thing, that was a TV show or a film?
It was a film.
It was a film, yeah. But you had written scripts. So what was it like? Is there any crisis that goes on, imposter syndrome, when you get
I will tell you that when I first decided, I was like, I'm going to do this film school thing. There was a zeitgeist moment, I'm sure you remember, late 80s, early 90s of the Spike Lees of the world, the Quentin former video clerk becoming a thing. And it did, originally, I think probably when I was a little younger, I was like, well, this world is closed to me. I don't know anyone. But then when I saw civilians start to break in, the penny dropped. And I literally said to myself, if they can do it, this means that it's a free-for-all. And if you've got the chops, you can do it. And I used to say to myself, it might as well be me as anyone else. And so that's what got me really to feel like what's on the page is going to determine my future. And like you said, opportunity meets, preparation. You don't know it at the time. When you're sitting at home at 3 a.m. and your friends are out at Lucky Strike and you're like, nope, not going. And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, because this is my real job. This whole waiting table, this is fun, but it's not my real job. And that's the thing that separated, I think. I always made time for, if I could make $1,000 a week waiting tables five nights a week, or make $400 working 3 nights a week and barely get by, I would make the $400, because then I could say in my head, hey, you've given yourself enough free time to treat writing as a job, not just as I tell my friends at the bar, I'm a writer. Well, I should be home writing. This way I gave myself no way to have an excuse of, well, I'm working so much. Like, no, you work 30 hours a week. The other 40 hours a week, you will be writing. So I made the discipline sort of fit my lifestyle. And I knew I avoided having kids and doing the things that a lot of my friends were like doing, trying for safety. When you talk about the imposter syndrome, it was do or die. Like literally it was, if I don't do this, I would put, if I'm 45 and I haven't made it, jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Because I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I was like, well, my job is to reverse engineer so that you can say I did everything possible to avoid the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, that's great. And so obviously once you actually got a gig with Law and Order was the first sort of full-time writing job where you're
I wrote 2 books, was writing screenplays the whole time. Then I wrote the Ben Stiller movie. Then these are the kind of serendipitous stories that again are Hollywood legend. The people I wrote the Ben Stiller movie for was a lovely woman named Gail Mutrix, and she left it on her nightstand. Her husband is a producer, and he picked it up one night before bed and he said, who wrote this? And she said, oh, some unknown guy. It's amazing. And he had a story by James Ellroy, who wrote LA Confidential, that they were trying to turn into a movie. And he said, well, do you think that guy would write our thing? So I wrote his James Ellroy thing, which made the blacklist for that year, which is this Hollywood screenwriting competition. Russell Crowe signed on to star, direct. Right after that, Jared Leto signed on to start. One of those never got made. But that's the thing that started becoming my calling card. So at that point, I had scripts that were generating some heat, and you could send people and go, this guy, hire him for this. And the funny thing is the Russell Crowe movie, which was right after the Ben Stiller movie, was owned by Dick Wolf's company. They own the actual property. So about 3 years into this, I've written 2 books. I've gotten nominal payments for both these scripts, nothing big because I'm not really a name yet. And the producer of the James Ellroy one, he would call me every few months, oh, it's going great or whatever. And my book money, which is not a lot of money, was starting to run out. And I was staring down the barrel of, well, better get my bartending shoes back out because, I'm not going to be James Missioner. And one day on the phone, I said to him, because his lot was on the NBC lot, and I said, Tony, I just got to say, you work for Dick Wolf could you just, I see all these, at the time there were 9 Law and Order things on the air, and I lived in New York. And I was like, brother needs to eat. I'm happy to work in TV. And he was like, oh, I thought you would think TV was beneath you. I'm like, so he literally in the cafeteria handed my script to the showrunner of a show called Law and Order SVU. There was a spin-off happening called Law and Order Los Angeles. It lasted for 1 season. I got on Law and Order Los Angeles. It got canceled But then they moved me right over to Law and Order SVU. And that was, I think SVU was probably my big break.
So obviously you're standing out wherever you go, or you're a coveted writer. So is it at this point you're starting to feel like, okay, I can see a career. I'm starting to feel maybe a little secure that you'll keep working. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. They did not ask me back for SVU, which is a whole other kit and caboodle, ultimately to the benefit of my career. But yeah, I mean, I would say by my second or third job, I understood that, knock wood, I'll probably be able to keep, as long as I can avoid a heroin habit or grabbing the wrong person's ass, I can probably keep working.
Stay away from the office party.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Kev Rogers here. You know, in marketing, we've got a split second to win attention, get our message across, and create a connection with our audience. People look at us and decide instantly, is this person for me? It's intimidating, I know, but I can help. Using the 60-second sales hook to tell your story is the fastest way to make that connection, create an instant bond with your best prospects, and turn skeptics into raving fans. And right now, get this, you won't believe it. You can get a free copy of the 60-second sales hook book by going to copychief.com/sales hook. That's copychief.com/sales hook. Go get it. It's free. All right, I want to get into some of the craft here, if you don't mind. I'm going to indulge myself in these questions I have. First of all, am I correct that, say with your honor, are you on that show for the whole season in a room of writers?
Yes.
And or are you assigned an episode?
So for season 1 of Your Honor, let me go back. This is what, 2018, I think? Yeah. For season 1 of Your Honor, at that point, I had been on enough shows that I had sort of worked my way. Like, again, it's like the military. For instance, I'll just run you through just so in case people are curious.
Yeah.
Technically, your first job is as a staff writer. Your next job is story editor.
Okay.
Your next job after that is executive story editor. Your next job after that is co-producer, then producer, then executive producer. There's nothing bigger than executive producer. That's basically the people who run the show. By the time I'd worked on enough shows, by the time I got to Your Honor, that I was what they call a number 2. So I was, if you watch The Sopranos, I'm Sylvia. I'm basically the writer who comes in right underneath the showrunner. And if the showrunner has to go on vacation or if there's an emergency, they go, hey, you handle this. Okay. You know, I'm sort of the trusted sort of lieutenant. So that's who I was to Peter Moffat, who I adore. Peter Moffat is this British writer who did he did Your Honor. He created a show called Criminal Justice in the UK, which became The Night Of in America.
Great show. Great movie.
Yeah, great show. So Your Honor was his first stab at American style television, like full on American TV.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I was his number 2 for that. And yeah, every day it was a room of 6 to 8 of us. And you sit around, there's a big whiteboard, and you literally, you go, okay, Michael Desiato, his son just ran someone over. What happens next? And then 6 or 7 of you just go, oh, what if this happens? And then that goes on the board. And someone else goes, I don't know. And then you erase it and something else goes on. It's a real sort of round robin debate idea storm. Yeah. Which is at its best is what a writer's room is, I think.
Yeah. In a show like that with so many moving parts that cross over in critical ways, do you have to have it mapped out completely for the season?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I had to leave during episode 9 because I got the job show running Them on Amazon. So I was there. We had sketched out the finale, but really not everything had been written or shot, but everything was definitely mapped out. And for something like a crime show, you have to, because it's half math to a degree. Colonel Mustard in the parlor with a lead pipe, you have to sort of pay these things off and plant them. So it's not the kind of thing where you just sit in a room and go, oh, that'd be cool. Because you have to go, well, this happened in episode 2. Are we paying this off in episode 7, or are we just pretending it never happened?
I want to talk specifically, if we can, and if you remember, about episode 4, because again, when people say, what's your favorite show? I go, Your Honor, for me, season 1, bar none, like best, just because it was what it was. And by the way, my wife couldn't watch it. Our son was just starting to drive. Yeah, so it was too close to home for her. It was hard for me too, but man. And I always say, remember the dinner scene? And people go, yeah, that's when I was like, this show. So it's episode 4. It's when everything comes to a head for Michael. Everybody's in the room. People were invited who weren't supposed to be. Everybody
Did I write that?
Yes.
I think, okay.
He wrote that episode.
Yeah.
Everybody who he's trying to keep secrets from.
Yes.
Are suddenly sitting in front of him. And now the dog has the bloody rag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, I just want to, what is it like? Is that a moment for you? Does that have to happen for you in private to create that scenario? No, that's workshopped.
Yeah, it's workshopped. I will tell you, Peter Moffat came up with the bloody rag. I did not. Those for me, every single room is different. Every single showrunner is different. For example, Aaron Sorkin on the Newsroom will hire 20 brilliant 25-year-olds, and he will tell them, give me every amazing idea you have. Not a word of yours will ever be on screen. Just heads up.
Yeah, sure.
I write everything.
Yeah.
Other shows are a little more egalitarian in that, Dave, you're going to write this episode, Mary, you're going to write that episode, and a lot of stuff can stay. But the showrunner ultimately has to do a final pass to make sure that it sounds the way they have it in their head, etc. So that flourish of the rag is definitely Peter Moffat's. I think everything else was mine. And also something that people don't know, on a lot of shows, there can be a bit of a Frankenstein, where if this scene that we thought was going to be in episode 5 feels better in 4, we'll pull it into 4. And that can sometimes happen after the script is already even turned in, and you go, oh, you know what? This really wants to be here, so we'll take that. So there's no real ego attached. No writer's going to go, but that was my scene from my episode. Right. It's all for the greater good. And that stuff happens for me in the room. I am not a sit at home and figure it out. My goal on a TV show, and now that I run shows, is that I'll give you the anecdote is, in real life, I'm the asshole on the couch who every time something happens, I go, well, that's bullshit. Well, why are they doing that? And my wife is like, you just let it play out. And it's very hard for me to sort of contain they lost me.
Right. So
my goal in a writer's room is to pitch something and then see if anyone can kick a hole in it.
Yeah.
Because that's me on the couch. Kick a hole for the asshole like me.
Yeah.
Who's looking for, you forgot, he wouldn't do that because in the other episode. Right. So I really like stuff to be tight and unassailable. So at least we did our job in terms of emotional logic as well as logistical stuff, if that makes sense.
100%. I love that. Question on that. When you get that locked in and make sure it's secure, does that then give you the freedom to sort of project or allude in earlier episodes to something that might happen? Because
Ideally, while you're breaking it. So what we did in Your Honor, we would take the whiteboard and we would start with, the first episode of anything is called 101. It's never 0, it's always 1. So the pilot is always 101. So we would write down 101, and we already had the pilot because Peter wrote the pilot on his own. That's how the show got picked up. Then we go 102, 103, 104, up to 110. And we would sketch out 102, I don't remember what happens in the show, but Michael covers up the crime. 3, Adam breaks up with his girlfriend and something else. And you'd write little touchstones like dinner party, everything goes to shit. Mm-hmm. So we have little touchstones where we think we want to know where it wants to go. And then our job is to sort of fill that in. So we can always have a reference, like you said, if we're in 102 going, oh, he covers this up and he breaks the cell phone and throws it down a gutter. In 105, someone could say, well, what if someone finds the ping from the cell phone and it's in a sewer and they go down there and find it? That's because we've sort of done our work in sort of setting it up and then knocking it down.
Right.
And I don't want to get too in the weeds about craft of screenwriting. A good, we call it set it up and knock it down. It's terrible to do it in one scene to the next. Like if I do the cell phone, throw it in the trash, and the next scene is someone says, we have a ping.
Right.
That's kind of lame. But if you do it so that people almost forget about it, and then you bring it up, it feels intentional but smart. And you've sort of paid things back to where people can go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, the shortbread cookies in Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's great. That's so critical. Like shows that move quickly, but feel like they're taking their time in letting you in. Right. I don't normally watch much broadcast crime drama anymore. That's not just because I don't, whatever. But it did catch one of the new Law and Orders, and it's shot completely differently than the other ones because it's like 4 in a row on some whatever Monday night or whatever. And this one, man, was action to action to action to action to action. Have you seen that by any chance?
I have not. I have a. We can. And by the way, nothing is off limits.
Okay.
To me.
Okay.
I have a real aversion to Wolf Universe, and which, by the way, I'm happy to explicate or not. I just don't want to take you down a rabbit hole. So the short answer is no. I have not seen it.
Well, if you want to, spark your rage fire, and to me, I was so mad and annoyed and frustrated. Not because I wanted to enjoy the show, but that it even got made as maybe a test because it was, dude, imagine literally only the action scenes, no buildup, no dialogue, no context, no drama, no pause. And I'm just going, what is going on? Is this the trailer? Now we're halfway through the episode. It felt like the trailer. So I don't know what I guess I'm getting at is that the rotting of broadcast? Is that just networks being too unimaginative to try new things and just give the same guy more money and let him do whatever he wants?
Yes. I mean, here's the thing about network TV. Network TV is amazing. If you want a house in Malibu and 3 pools and whatever, it's amazing. If you want to have somewhat of a creative soul or some integrity, it's a much more difficult place to exist. And I say that because their entire reason for being is, I'll use a metaphor, is tied. Yeah. If their whole thing is they live in fear of somebody from the Midwest calling in and saying to Tide or Procter and Gamble, I will never buy your soap again because this episode made me feel X, Y, and Z.
Wow.
That is what they live in fear of.
Wow.
Because they are ultimately selling ad space. That's their entire job.
Yeah.
Which is why, for instance, Law and Order. I will give you my short version, which ties into this of my problem with Law and Order. It is a show that for the last 30 years has fixated on the world of law enforcement. Now, despite over the last 5 to 8 years, what many sentient, aware, empathic people have seen on television, protests, a sort of, hey, maybe this whole officer-friendly thing is not real. Maybe there's another side to it. That is too dangerous for a network to take on because the second the police benevolence union or a bunch of all lives matter people start calling in and going, I didn't sign up for this BLM stuff. What are you saying about the police? They have to shut it down. So my real problem is when we talk about integrity and being able to tell emotional truths, you have an empire of 5 or 6 shows dealing with law enforcement. And never once do you float the idea, maybe all these guys are not good.
Yeah.
And that's my problem with network in general. Network comedies are immune to that. I think network comedies are, Abbott Elementary, Modern Family, The Office are works of genius because they don't have to play by those same rules. Although The Office
because it's satire. Yeah.
Yes.
That's very interesting. So the politics comes from the corporations that are buying their ad space essentially. And if it takes out, and so interesting. I'm trying to think of so if you, it's not enough to I'm thinking of Chicago PD, which to me is a mildly better show, right? They do bad shit all the time, those cops. but maybe he's kind of forgiven or whatever. But at least
here's how they're always presented as the outlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the few bad apples.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I was up for doing a reboot of a show called New York Undercover. And I told them, this is after working in Wolf World for a while. I'd been out for 10 years. So, and this is deep pandemic, by the way. So I told my people, I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's a way to get the Malibu pool and stick to my guns. I said, tell Wolf World, I'll take a meeting with them as long as I can do a 21st century version of New York Undercover. And my pitch was basically a Training Day style pitch, which was now it's going to be a queer Latina who is assigned to work with an African-American undercover narcotics cop, but she is there to investigate him because he's crooked. And she comes to find out the entire precinct is crooked. But while she's riding in a car with him and essentially bonding and pretending that they're partners, blah, blah, blah. I pitched this to certain people. I'm going to leave very specific names out of it, but anyone who knows who I'm talking about will understand. And on the Zoom, I was stopped by this gentleman who said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I can already hear the press coming. Beep, beep turns into a snowflake doing woke cop stuff. He said, a queer Latina? He's like, no. And then he goes, well, the good thing is, if I make her sexy enough, we can maybe get away. And I'm on the phone or on the Zoom, and part of me is like, where's my record button? Because I could make millions. I could own NBC after this. He goes, my audience is never going to believe that cops are crooked. And I said,
wow.
What? And I said, you've got the market cornered on every type of cop show ever. There's a lot of people like me who are dying for another take. Like, what if, let's do the universe where these are, this is the Dark Knight version of what this is like. I said, we just had an election. The country sort of refuted the last 4 years. He looked at me and said, you think Trump lost the election, my friend? I have another thing coming. And I was like, yeah. And at this point, I'm like, phone record. Is there a way to do this? And then I'll get that pool. Yeah. Oh, I'll give you the capper, by the way, because I have no allegiance to the fucking guy. He goes, and by the way, you keep saying you're a person of color. I look at you, I just see a Jewish guy just like me.
Oh, man.
And I literally said, well, we can argue about that all day, but this has been great. And I look forward to talking to you. And I got off the Zoom. I called my agents. I said, I don't care if they back up a Brinks truck full of money. There is nothing I would ever do to work with these people ever again. Never going to happen. Of course, 2 days later, I get a call like, Dave, after he yelled at all the assistants, who the fuck put me on with this guy? And then he goes, but I don't know. Maybe he's on to something. So that's a long tangent. I apologize.
Wow, dude. So this is, it's this constant thing of like, what is actual integrity intensifying drama and what is like, this guy's having a moment.
And also what people think is commercial. I mean, typically Hollywood is about 10 years behind. So in Hollywood's mind, it's still a third rail. Don't go after law enforcement. You don't do that. 10 years from now, there will be that show. Like 20 years ago, The Shield came out, right? The Shield posited it's all of them. Like, it's not, it's this whole precinct. You would think 20 years later, network TV would be able to take a slightly more nuanced view of law enforcement in America.
Yeah, I don't want to go deeper, but I mean, the things they do show and expose and in some ways glorify on those shows where they don't want to upset Midwesterners, rape, sexism, all these things. I don't understand why it draws the line there. It's there's a whole nother psychological amazing stuff, dude. Okay, I guess I want to get to the commerce part a little bit. Again, I'm thinking of a listener who's like, my dream is to write TV. Maybe could you do it this way? take us through like a fictional character who's a writer in their career, around how much they'd earn at different times if they were getting sort of breaks that compounded each other over, I don't know, 10, 20 years.
Boy, that's a tough one because, every rank is different. And I honestly don't remember. There's sort of minimums. There's like WGA minimums for every job. I'm always hesitant to give out numbers because, again, it can change. Here's what I will say.
Okay.
I don't know of a working screenwriter at any level who cannot pay their bills. It's almost like I'm a corporate lawyer. Boy, are things hard. I can't make ends meet. If you're a corporate lawyer, and unless you're just saying it, but if you're actually a corporate lawyer, you're doing fine. We are grossly overpaid in many ways. But look, what we do is not everyone can do. But if you are working, you're doing well. I know that's vague.
That's okay. Even that's enlightening. Yeah.
Because, look, I've been doing this since 2011 now. And every year has gotten a little bit better. But about 3 years in, now I have no kids. I keep my life, as Neil McCauley from the movie Heat said, there's a bag packed, and in 5 minutes, if I feel the heat coming, I can be gone. So I don't have a lot of, Jimmy doesn't need braces. Jimmy doesn't exist as far as I know of, knock wood. But about 3 years into my gig, I got a call from my accountant, and he said, do you know what the date of today is? I'm like, I do not. He's like, this is the day you paid off your student loans. And I had $100,000 worth of student loans.
Wow.
And I had them since 1985. And within 3 years and this was just, and I didn't know they were paid off. I didn't know there was some special fund for it. He's just like, no, we just wrote a check. It's gone. And I was unaware, but that's the kind of, it's like,
I get it.
But being poor and growing up poor, the fear never leaves you, as Oprah famously said, like 10 years ago, she's like, even now, if I'm in the checkout line, my fingers are crossed, my card goes through.
Yeah.
That never leaves, but that's more of my low income upbringing than the industry.
I still, every time I'm at a gas pump, I'm still a little shocked that I can let it fill.
Yeah.
I just remember so clearly having to check my bank account to see how much gas I could put in my car,
Absolutely. So here's what I would say is like, this is not a career to get into to make money.
Sure.
You will. If you start working, you will make money. Mm-hmm. But it's not the kind of thing like being a stockbroker or going into crypto or whatever, because the stuff you have to do in order to get where you are, you have to do for free. That 10,000, that Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours, no one will pay you for the 10,000 hours. Sure. And what you're seeing now is, look, I'm a benefit of, and I support all the diversity in the world. I happened to come up right at the end of an era where you still had to do the 10,000 hours, but then little things like diversity started to really matter. So I'll get a meeting because, David Matthews, biracial African-American, we need some of those. But I also luckily have done the 10,000 hours so that when I get in there, it's not a gimme. What you will see nowadays is, unfortunately, a lot of people are set up to fail, which is you'll find there's a money grab on, we need diversity. So you'll see a lot of studios going, there's a transgender Inuit writer with this amazing story, give them $5 million and we'll go. Just because that person wrote one great pilot that highlights their life does not mean they're capable of turning out a script every week on time, on budget, working in a room and understanding production. That is a very different skill set. So you get a lot of people who are sort of bumped up to the majors, but their careers are short-lived because they can't follow through, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
they just don't have.
Because I was going to ask that, like the idea of like, okay, you writing scripts, putting in your 10,000 hours, and all of a sudden now you're a showrunner. Now a lot of that must be managing people.
Yeah. It's literally personality management, also the buck stops with you thing. And, every writer in a room until they get to be showrunner, all of us, every room, I would go home after Boardwalk Empire with all the, not home, but out for the pub with all the writers. If this was our show, we would do it this way. Or on Narcos, we go, well, if I was running it, we would do it this way. So now you're the guy and whatever choice you make, these other 6 people are going to go have a beer and go, why the hell is he doing it that way? but you kind of have to trust your gut and go, well, now heavy hangs the head, woe is me, but that decision's on you. I will give you an example, which I don't think is telling tales out of school. Season 1 of Your Honor. Season 1 was supposed to be a limited.
Right.
It was not supposed to come back. Right before I left to go do them, I said to Peter, look, since Brian's not coming back, he said, I'm not coming back. The ending should be, I don't want to spoil your favorite show though. So I'm torn because it's your favorite season of television. So I don't want to spoil your favorite show.
That's okay. I already have the visceral. It's in my heart. So
okay. So I said, here's what you do. The end of the episode, you have Brian K. and Michael come to the restaurant. He's outside the window. And Jimmy, Adam's inside with Fia at the party.
Yeah.
I said, you have Jimmy see Bryan Cranston out the window and go up to Adam and embrace him in a hug. And you go to black. Basically, Jimmy steals his son. He's like, you took my son. I'm bringing your son into my family now. And then season 2 would be Adam's, if there was a season 2. Because I said, look, leave yourself a door.
Right.
That if there's a season 2, now it's Michael's got to get his son out of the fucking potentially, he might become, a consigliere to this fucking crime family or whatever.
Right.
So I was a little like, when I heard that, and I understand, Peter was like, yeah, but Brian's not coming back. So it's over.
Yeah.
My son is dead. I understand the choice, but it's one of those choices. And in my head, I was like,
because you can't tell the future, but why would who knows why Cranston ended up coming back or whatever.
So for season 2, I consulted on it. And boy, that was those first 2 weeks were rough because I said every day I'd be like, I don't understand what there is for the first few scenes you see of him suicidal. I said, first of all, this guy has nothing and he wants to die.
Right.
Because there's what else is there? I stayed for 2 weeks as a consultant and then they went their own way. God bless. But they used a lot of that. But it was a tough one because we didn't give the character really anything to fight for, which is hard for a character, right? They got to want something.
And that's what's interesting is because they did come back around a little bit to him being offered a consigliere type role, right?
Yeah,
way late, but I was really hoping it would pay off because my thing was this. I was excited when I saw that there was a season 2. I always talked about the show in regards of a limited because I'm like, it has to be a limited because the way it ends, it's poetic.
Yeah.
And 2 comes and I'm like, well, I love the show so much. I'm not mad that there's another season, but how are we going to do this? Last thing I want to ask you about, I want to respect your time. You've been very generous, man.
Oh, I'm doing nothing, by the way. So
okay.
I'm sitting around waiting for Apple to call me and green light or not green light my new show.
So cool. Exciting. All right. So writing yourself into a corner, which sounds like basically what you guys do for a living. I think about like Billions, for instance, right? I just, and I've heard of Get It, a producer was talk about this. And you could feel it as a viewer. You're like, how in the hell are they going to get? And it's pretty cool when, once an episode almost, you can say that phrase out loud to your partner and they make it and it somehow gets more interesting. But man, that's perilous. I mean, there's times you don't get out of that.
Yes. I mean, that's the job. I know Breaking Bad, their whole goal every episode was make it impossible for us to even know how he's going to get out of this next episode.
Wow.
And that was the reset. I personally can't write that way because I find it exhausting. I'm a little more of I think The Sopranos is probably my Old Testament in terms of, and if you notice in The Sopranos, no cliffhangers ever. There's never a cliffhanger on The Sopranos. They end, they're eating dinner, they end on something poetic or whatever. You can't really do that anymore because of content and everyone's afraid of next and changing the channel. But I think the tendency toward writing yourself into a corner every episode ultimately devalues storytelling, because what then happens is the audience, it's almost like, lab rats, we're conditioned with endorphins and whatever. And if we don't, if it's not 11 every time, we're not satisfied. So hopefully some of that I think will change. Let it be more character driven and organic.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I agree. It's like I said, it's like a nice trick. It's sort of like someone who can do a wheelie. I love when I see guys doing wheelies down the street on bikes. That out there. Man, I'm just like, that's so great. Thank you, man, for doing a wheelie. But then, if every bike was doing a wheelie,
Yeah. Do you ride motorcycles?
No, I don't. No.
I just started a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I'm not a wheelie guy. I am a granny. I'm like the little old British guy with the goggles and the putt, and I'm to the store and that's it.
See, you're in LA, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm in Florida, and crazy drivers both places. So to me, it's just, I think I would love it in some way. Do you go out into like the canyon or something, or do you drive it around town? Yeah. I
have a 10-mile limit of where I will go. If there is a 3% chance of rain, I'm not getting on. If there's a freeway, I'm not getting on. If I had a bad dream the day before, I'm not getting it. To me, it is a very I understand it's dangerous. I'm going to mitigate the danger as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, great. David, man, this has exceeded my very high expectations for this conversation, man. I can't thank you enough for sharing so openly. And I know you're going to inspire a lot of people who hear this to know how to go after their dream a little better.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Let me know. Nothing else? You don't need anything else? Or
no, I think I'm good. I'd love to hear more about what you're working on, and what's the best way to keep up with a writer like you's career? I mean, it all kind of happens behind the scenes until the show comes out. Is there such a way?
Yeah. IMDb or I guess. Yeah. Even now, when I look on my Wikipedia about once every 10 years, and I'm like, they don't even have half the shit I've done on there. Like who does this stuff? I
was looking at that too. So you don't do that? You don't write your own page? It's like somebody on your team or something? Yeah.
No, I don't even know who. No one on my team does. Oh, I don't know how to enter. Yeah.
That's a
no idea.
Thing. Yeah, you mentioned like 5 projects that I'll never know about because they didn't go through or whatever, right? So, but that's all work. There's work you created, scripts you wrote. So such a dramatic part of it to me, knowing, how do you stay motivated when you're never sure it's going to go?
You still get paid.
Okay.
That's like, if, whether a show actually gets on the air or not, you still get paid for whatever you did,
Okay.
That's the consolation prize. I mean, there are people with mansions who have never had a show on the air.
Not a single IMDb credit.
Yeah. And I've been lucky. With the shows I've been on. So
yeah, great stuff. Well, I'll be here enjoying your work, man, and hopefully we can keep in touch a little bit.
Oh, thanks, man. Alrighty, Kevin, take care.
All right. See you, bud.
Bye.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. copychief.com/CCR.